Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese. I'm a therapist here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I love movies, TV, and pop culture. So I figured I'd marry the two together in an effort to help people better understand relationships and mental health. Before we get into this week's show, I need to mention a few things. First, thank you for subscribing, downloading, and listening to the first episode of the show. I've received some great responses to it and would love to hear more of what you think. You can let me know on Twitter. The Twitter handle there is @therapisttheater, THERAPISTTHTR, because every Twitter handle has to be 15 characters or less. Or you can email the show at therapisttheater@gmail.com. After all, this show is for you, the listener. So let me know your thoughts. In fact, here's something specific I'd love to ask you. At the beginning of each episode, I'm spending some time talking with my guest about themselves, who they are, how they got into therapy, and what they do in it specifically. Do you like that? Do you want more of it? Do you want less of it? Tell me. Go to the show's Twitter at therapisttheater or email me at therapisttheater@gmail.com. So on today's episode, I'm talking with Sasha Cory-Pack. Sasha is just now opening the doors of her practice in Nashville and was an intern at the counseling center when I was there doing my internship. On top of that, we were partners in supervision. She's one of my absolutely favorite people, and I'm sure you're going to love what she has to say about this week's movie, Moonlight. I do need to put a bit of a warning on today's episode. While discussing the movie, there are a few profanities, and if you're listening while you're driving your kids to work, I might recommend waiting until you're at work or on your evening run. With that said, let's go ahead and dim the lights, and welcome to another episode of Therapist Theater. Hi, welcome to, this is the second, I don't know, it's not in order. This is an episode.
Okay.
Welcome to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese. I am a therapist in Nashville, Tennessee, and today I have the absolute pleasure of sitting with Sasha. Sasha, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, I am great. We are here on the porch at the counseling center that we both interned at, getting our degrees. So, I mean, you know, the original plan was to like go to the library or something, but to have this idea to be in the place where we got the training and the experience and where we started with our time seeing clients, I can't think of anything that's better, that's more appropriate.
Yeah, this is a good space. This is a good safe space. I love it here.
Yeah. So let's start with just talking a little bit about you. So like I started my grad school journey when I was 34.
Mm-hmm.
Yes? 34. Yeah. With a 13-year break in between my undergrad and my grad. So this was like my second career. Like I had a career.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came into this. What was it that brought you into therapy? Like, tell me about the beginning of your therapeutic journey.
Well, I'm a 40-year-old mom, and I'm actually 40, about to be 43, but I was 40 when I started grad school here, and I had been a teacher and a social services and social justice person before this. And I'd always wanted to be a therapist, but I was raising kids and dealing with life, and I raised my brother also, and so I didn't get a chance to go back, and so I always knew that this was the dream and this was the goal. I earned a master's degree in education before I came here.
And you had a master's?
Yeah, I already had a master's. This is the second one for me, and
Humble brag.
I was just determined, you know, these internships, I couldn't do it while raising kids. Could not afford to work for free while raising kids, so now I'm here.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So you came to get the degree here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do an LPC or an MFT?
MFT.
Okay. What was it about an MFT. Well, what is an MFT, first off?
Well, it's a degree in marriage and family therapy, and it's systems-based. And I guess I decided to go for marriage and family therapy over going to the licensed professional counselor route because I'm a systems person. I started off, my first degrees were in political science and Spanish. And I started off working in government roles. And then I really found when I was working for the government and then working for nonprofits that I really wanted to work more directly with people. I started craving time. Like at some points I worked as a case manager or as a mentor or as an advocate, and I just wanted to be with people. And so I then decided to go into the classroom. And then once I was in the classroom, I started kind of seeking smaller and smaller environments, working with specialized populations. By the time I left working for the school district, I was working with bilingual kids with disabilities. And so this was the natural next step to really go from macro to micro. And so since I see that thing of, the bigger picture and how do people at the small level fit into the bigger picture, systems seemed the way to go for me, especially because I wanted to work with marginalized people.
Yeah. Wow. So you had so much experience in systems thinking before you even stepped into this role. And I love that you used macro versus micro, because it's the best way that I've found to describe it before. These macro systems of everything from governmental to community to specific population systems down to micro systems of family of origin and nuclear family and even extended family to see, none of us are islands that exist unto ourselves. We have so many things that build into us and feed into us. And, I just remember the very first thing of Murray Bowen that I ever read, where he talked about even just emotions, just kind of spider web out from us. And when one person in the family is feeling anxious or scared, how it just affects everybody else.
Yeah, it affects the whole system. I think I really feel sometimes that when people come into therapy, they really pathologize themselves, especially people who want to go to therapy. They usually think something's wrong with me. And I think most of the time people's behavior makes sense in the context of the system they're in. So if you can help them to understand their system and get to know what's going on in their system, I feel like that's really a path for them to be able to even have the, I guess, positive self-image that they need and the self-esteem that they need in order to be able to move forward and get where they want to be.
And that's probably the biggest difference between an LPC and an MFT is a person making sense in the context of their system.
Yes.
Versus an LPT may say, and I would say, in the end, an LPC and an MFT, we all do the same things.
Right.
Because I'm an MFT as well. But an LPC may say a person makes sense in the context of their individual story. An MFT may say that a person makes sense in the context of their system.
Right.
Which is a part of their story, and a story is a part of the system. And so, one person says tomato, one person says tomato.
Correct.
We're all going to be sitting in a room eating the red thing with the green top.
Yes.
Like that's it's all the it's all the same. So you came and you studied the MFT stuff. What is it that made you? Why the counseling center at Trevecca? Like, why choose here for the internship?
I really came because I, as being a person who was sort of coming from outside of maybe Trevecca and Nashville and this whole counseling scene, I'm a brown person. I am a person who is maybe not of higher socioeconomic status, and I was really nervous about breaking into the therapy world. And I was looking for a space where I was going to feel safe enough to be experimental and to try to learn and challenge myself. I really needed to be challenged. And I felt like the counseling center, the environment here was so safe, and I felt like they are really careful about who they pick to work here. People like you, being able to have partners like you, in therapy and things like that, just to learn and supervision, that was what was really important to me about coming here. I don't think that I realized how much my particular voice and point of view was going to be needed on this campus. I thought I was going to come
You
here
ain't kidding.
and probably not have any clients.
Yeah.
You know, and I ended up having people on a waiting list for me,
Yeah.
which was kind of crazy for me.
Wow. I didn't know that either. But so I got to say, this podcast, something I've been dreaming up for like maybe 2 months. And whenever I had the idea and I started checking in to see, there's got to be somebody else already doing this. And there wasn't anything like this. And I just thought, what? How? How in the world? And so once I got into it, I started making a list of people that I wanted to talk to. And you were at the very top of the list.
Thank you.
At the very top. And, you know, so we interned here at the Trevecca Counseling Center together. But then on top of that, we were supervision partners.
Right.
So we sat with Dr. Hopkins, with Sarah, in supervision. And through that, I would say that, you know, anybody that worked here, we kind of knew each other.
Right.
You know, we saw each other, we spoke. Some of us were in classes together. But in supervision, you know, you see, it's a different level. It's a different level of knowing, because you get to talk about, you know, this is what I'm experiencing in this session. And I think, you know, you do talk about the client a little, but you talk about yourself a lot.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm going to use the word blessed by, I'm going to use the word gifted, and I'm going to use the word just flat out enjoyed. I'm going to use all three of those in having supervision with you, was just the humility that you would bring to this field.
Oh, thank you.
And
I hadn't thought about it that
and
way.
you know, to be able to sit on the couch with you and to have you say, you know, I don't know what to do here.
Right.
But at the same time, being comfortable enough with yourself to be able to sit with the client. So even, and I think that this just speaks to the strength of your character, to not know what to do, but be fully present and engaged with a person. So maybe I don't know what the right intervention is. Maybe I don't know what the next step is, but for right now, I'm sitting with you. I got your hand. I got your back. And you and I are doing this together. Just, to me, made the times of supervision, the times of our friendship, and the times of, like, even looking forward down the road of just knowing you and knowing, you know, I've got your number. I'm going to call you. I'm going to talk with you in a friend role, in a consultation role. It just means the most to me, because
I trust them.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's so much that I had confidence in myself at that point. I trust my clients. I trust people.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think you got to trust yourself too, because to even, like I said, to be in the place where, like, I don't know what to do, but I'm comfortable enough in who I am to hold the space and to hold this feeling, and to be with this person, I think just takes a very special kind of person. And
it's resilience, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's a resilience point.
And so, I mean, I think, you know, I look back at our times in supervision together, and I'm just so thankful that I got partnered with you, because there were so many times that just to listen to you talk about you being in the midst of your journey was such a gift to me. Because I think, you know, my particular nature is, you know, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing, but I think I'm just on, you know, in my journey, it's still becoming comfortable enough with myself to be able to be with another person in the midst of I don't know.
Right.
Because, you know, we talk Enneagram a lot, like, you know, type 6 over here, and I find so much safety in knowing, so that when I don't know and I feel unsafe, I feel unsteady.
Right.
And so, you know, part of my biggest journey is just getting to the place where I know I'm okay if I don't know.
Right. Yeah, you can bring yourself to the therapy room.
Yeah. And so for me, you know, getting partnered up with you was just such a gift.
Yeah, that's why I came here, I think. I think that that's one thing I love about Dr. Hopkins. I guess I give her a shout out here. She seems to know when she brings people what they need. That seems to be her gift. And I probably wouldn't have known that I was going to get so much out of supervision. I went into the supervision room so afraid, and like everybody else here at this place knows what they're doing.
It all together.
Yeah.
And then you find out none of us did.
Right. Yep. That took a minute for me to figure that out. And I was just so happy to be able to find out, okay, it's okay for me to have some space to figure this out. Because I think that maybe it's not my way to pretend that I know things that I don't. That is one thing I can say about myself. I don't pretend to know things. If I don't know, I just don't know, and I'll say it. And so sometimes that can be a little bit of a nervous place for me, and I don't realize other people just aren't that way.
Yeah.
So sometimes people are putting on a front. So it was good to be here where this is a place where everybody had the comfort to be able to know and that they can just speak and be who they are.
Yeah. So in the midst of doing the internship, in the midst of finishing up school, striking out, I remember in like our second class here, they started talking about what population do you want to work with? What specialty do you want to work with? And I'm just sitting halfway back in the classroom because I'm not a front row person. And just thinking, I just got here.
Right.
How am I supposed to know these things?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the population? Do you know the specialty? And B, how did you get to where you knew that was the right thing?
I guess I think I know and then don't know. I think that's like I don't ever believe that we've ever arrived at anything. I know that I like dealing with marginalized populations. That seems to be my specialty. But at the same time, because I am a systemic thinker, I think everybody is a marginalized population. I see that. And so I came in here, I think, with a specific idea that I just really mainly wanted to work with the LGBTQ community. And I still do want to work with the LGBTQ community, and I still do want to work with people of color. I think those are my areas of interest. But I find that when you really get down into the work with people, even people who are maybe not recognized in being marginalized, I think that everybody has some part of them. I'm pretty big into the internal family system. Everybody has some part of them that is marginalized, that doesn't fit in. And so I just want to work with people. I just love people. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just love people. I think that this whole idea that there is a larger group that is homogenous is kind of a lie that we're told. That's one of the reasons why I picked this movie. And I don't think that I think we're just all, I think we're all connected to each other. And I think so many humans just feel marginalized from each other.
The last episode that I did with Rachel, she talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how at the tip top of the list is this need to belong.
Yes.
This need to be a part of something bigger than us. Mm-hmm. And I think that across the pantheon of types of people in the world, no matter who you are, where you came from, you have that desire to belong. Now, some people are born into a spot where they are gifted with that belonging.
Right.
Like from the beginning, they're told you belong. You're a part
or you're
of
the
this.
prototype.
Yeah. And other people are born kind of being cast out. And having to find that.
I always say this. I said this recently in conversation about this topic. It seems like marginalized people who are traditionally marginalized, people of color, people who maybe not be gender conforming or heterosexual, it seems like they are born with a cup of coffee in their hands, and everybody else, I noticed that other people seem to figure it out.
Yeah.
That it just maybe takes them a different amount of time. I think people who are marginalized don't get to be born or walk in society with an illusion of things, whereas I think people who fit maybe the prototype of what is quote unquote normal or what is quote unquote mainstream have this ability to kind of be asleep for a while.
You said born with a cup of coffee. I think the way that I've thought about it before is I have been given the privilege of being ignorant. As a white, heterosexual, cisgendered male, I have the absolute privilege of being ignorant to being marginalized, of being ignorant to not having to think about. And it's one of those, you don't know what you don't know things.
Right.
And so part of, me becoming a therapist, part of me being able to sit with people and be an observer, a listener, to really be able to receive the gift of their story is to hear so many people's heartbreak in the midst of feeling like they don't belong.
Right.
And that's not to say I haven't had the moments where I don't feel, or where I have felt like I don't belong. I certainly have. But that's to say there's been so many times I haven't had to think about it.
Well, yeah. And
just
I think,
because of what I look like.
And I think there's some resilience that people don't recognize in marginalized people, and that they may not recognize in themselves, because I think that since you've never had the illusion that you fit in, when trauma hits, there's less of a shock. Because trauma hits everybody, right? The socialization process of being human is trauma.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I guess that's the spot that I'm at right now. As far as knowing what population I want to work with, I feel like even as a mixed race person, that's kind of naturally the space that I inhabit, is this space between privilege and marginalization. And I don't feel anything that happens is an accident. So I think that my work is in being in that space. And I think a lot of people are not comfortable in the space in between.
Yeah. It's this weird, I come from two places.
Yes.
Don't feel like I totally belong in either.
Yes.
But here I am.
Yes.
And I'm just as important and valuable and worthy as anybody in either place.
Yes. So it made sense for me to be at Trevecca, at the counseling center, working with people who are marginalized. Because on one hand, I'm so very privileged to be in this private Christian university, safe, gated little community that we're in. But at the same time, I very much feel sometimes being other in this space.
Yeah. I think that to get to a place where you can allow, not you, but like us, anybody, a person, can allow your story to become something more than just something that is in the past.
Yeah.
Something that can still be with you in your present, and something that can even be a part of the gift that you give others in being with them. I think to be able to do that just is the mark of a person who is so strong and so resilient.
I love narrative therapy for that reason.
Yeah.
Because you're making your own story.
Yeah. Yeah. So all that to say, I'm so glad I've gotten to sit with you in the past. I'm so glad we're sitting together right now.
I'm excited too. This is going to be really fun today.
So we end up watching a movie called Moonlight.
Right.
And
which is just the nature of my personality to be like, Josh, here's a hard thing.
I'm gonna throw you in the deep end here, which I mean,
and then feel guilty about it.
Oh yeah, you shouldn't, because I mean, like, even I think coming into the education that we got here, like, I just recognized we have such a rare opportunity to pursue knowledge of things that we didn't have and couldn't get in experiential stuff before. So, like, the very first project that I ever did here in Dr. Hopkins lifespan development, life
human
cycle development,
lifespan,
whatever it was. Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna pick the hardest thing I can think of, and so I did it on how we develop our gender identity.
Oh, that's so funny! I didn't know that. I didn't have Dr. Hopkins for that, but actually my project was on how we develop our gender identity.
Stop it. Are you serious?
Yeah, I had Dr. Wilson.
Oh my gosh.
I did an entire presentation on that.
Yeah, that's the first one I did, and I drug 3 classmates into it with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time since all of our classes were 6 weeks that I found something that I was like, oh, I wish that I could live in this for a longer time and learn more about it. And in an effort to help more people, whereas, you know, the way that our classes were structured, you know, you hit something hard for like a week and then after that you got to move on because you got to take other stuff in. But like, so for me, you know, when you said like, let's do Moonlight, I was like, okay, like let's jump in, let's cannonball in. I wasn't necessarily afraid of it, but I think I certainly recognized that it could be this. And then after the movie, it certainly was that, like I said a few minutes ago, like white, cisgendered, heterosexual male, what in the world can I bring to a conversation about this film? So let's do like a brief, like, what is the story in this movie?
Okay, so the story in the movie is about a young man who is African American. He's growing up in the hood with a mom who's drug addicted.
In Miami.
In Miami, and he kind of, as the movie starts, he is being bullied, and he's dealing with this mother that just seems to really not care about him, and then he gains some unlikely role models. One of them is a local drug dealer named Juan, who was just my favorite absolute character. I just loved him. He's been one of my favorite characters in movies that I've seen recently. And it just kind of goes through his development. So this is interesting for us to be, I guess, talking about this movie, because like you said, those are things that we both have studied. When I was in Human Lifespan and Development, I actually did an interview and filmed my son, who is genderqueer and who is also gay, and talked about how his development was. Wow. And he actually came into the class and talked with everybody.
Did he come to the counseling center to visit a few times?
He did.
Okay, so I met him.
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, he did. And so he's still a young adult, and we're still on the journey. But I kind of at first watched the movie to see things from his perspective and to try to understand a little bit more from his perspective. And then I think it resonated with me in some ways that were unexpected.
And I think that's probably the best way to describe this movie.
Yeah.
It's unexpected, and I would say, even being who I am, hit me in so many ways that I would have never pictured. I think, and we mentioned before we even hit record on this thing, there's so many layers to this. Yeah. There's so many different things you can look at, different things you can talk about, different things I'm sure for some people you could identify with. So the story of this young man, Chiron?
Yeah, Chiron.
Chiron. Yes. One of the things that I even just thought about right now that I did not notice. So the story's broken up into 3 parts. 3 different places in Chiron's life. And I think one of the things I liked the most about it is they didn't flash back and forth between them. They told a story of his childhood, a story of his adolescence, and a story of his young adulthood.
Yes.
And one of the things that I didn't even think about until just now is they had a title card for each part of the story.
Yes.
And the title card was a different name for him.
Yes.
In each part. So
yes. And that's actually, you're bringing that up, and that was one of the things that resonated with me from the movie. So and 2, my son and I experienced the movie very differently. When we talked about it, what he saw the movie as being about and what I saw the movie as being about were 2 totally different things. But for me, I thought that the name thing was really interesting because there is a thing with men in my family. My father, my brother, and my oldest son have all changed their names. And so that's an interesting thing. And I I really thought that it was neat that they showed how, you know, the name kind of tied into the identity that he was having at that time. So I thought that that was really interesting. That my family has a big thing about names, and even my last name is Cory, and that is, I don't have a grandmother named Cory. My dad changed the name, and my parents got married, and they were mixed race married, and they decided to get rid of both of their families' names, and so they just made up this new name, Cory. I think from the poem about Richard Cory. And so I'm the only family members with Cory as the last name.
And you ready for this? So another, just you and I, thing we have in common. So Treese, not my grandfather's name. It's my grandmother's maiden name.
Oh.
So when she had my dad's father, neither my dad nor I have ever known.
Oh.
So Treese is her maiden name.
Okay.
That then was given to my dad, was given to me. And so it's even like, you know, who knows what the last name could have been. But this is the last name that is, and the last name that was given.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that it's something that, you know, I think my dad has struggled with that a little bit growing up. Whereas I think for me, it was never, once again, ignorance. Ignorance is a privilege. It's something that I never thought about. I just thought, oh, I'm Josh Treese.
Yeah, my dad didn't know his father. And that's one reason why he wanted to change the name. It's because he didn't know his father. And so he was like, I think I'm just going to change to a completely new name.
I'm going to create my own identity. One of the things that Juan said to Sharon at the beginning, and I got to tell you, okay, so the first 2 movies that I watched for this, I have 2 pages of notes for.
Okay.
I have like less than a quarter for this one because you can't take your eyes off the screen the entire time. But one of the things that I thought, and this is, I think at the same time, beautiful and sad, which so many great things in life are. But Juan says to Sharon, at some point you got to decide for yourself who you're going to be.
Yes, I love that.
Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
Yeah. That totally reminded me of my dad.
Yeah.
That is something my dad has said and would have said, you know, again and again. I think that was his core and bottom line. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but my dad, you know, one of the things I loved about this movie and didn't expect was that my dad was a drug dealer. And I don't think most people who would meet me would know that that's something that I came from. And I didn't know it even when I was growing up. I didn't find out until I was older. And so I loved, it kind of gave me some mirroring and some voice to my experience and gave me a way to talk to people about what my experience has been growing up with that kind of person. Because I think people who have grown up outside of the community that I grew up in, I don't think, I guess let me be blunt, I don't think that the character was a surprise to most black or brown people. I think in Asian communities, in Hispanic communities, in black communities, that person is a staple of the community. But I also think that white people are not aware of that. And so I think when they think of drug dealer, they probably think that that I was raised in the hood and that I was raised with somebody who was probably pretty abusive and didn't have a lot of parenting. And so and also because my dad is dead and he died of a heart problem, I think people will often think, oh, well, you know, he probably got shot. So he didn't get shot. He died from a heart problem. But when I came to Trevecca, that was like a big thing. I mean, I still remember the first time I even said that out loud in a class. And I was like, just to come and just say that in front of people, I said that in the group therapy class. Yeah. And people were like, still, it was silent. It was pretty silent. But for people to still look me in my face after hearing that was really healing for me. Wow. Healing for me. And so I thought it was really nice for them to make the movie to be able to break some of those stereotypes.
And I think that's exactly what it is. It's a stereotype. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast was that so much about mental health is a stereotype
Word.
that people bring from movies, that
Word.
people bring from television,
Mm-hmm.
and not just about mental health treatment, not just about counseling, but about issues that people struggle with
Right.
mental health, issues that people struggle with systemically in families, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought, hey, let's take something that's already out there that people have a framework in,
Mm-hmm.
and let's turn it on its head,
Mm-hmm.
and let's talk with some people about some of the stuff that shows up in here.
Mm-hmm.
So the story of Sharon, the title card for the first part is Little,
Right.
which is what he is called by the friends that he has, by, I can't remember if his mom calls him that, but I
think
know
so.
that like even Juan kind of co-opts it a little bit by saying Little Man.
Mm-hmm.
And watching this first story, or the first part of the story, and this was something that we said before we started taping too. So we had the captions on. We were watching this.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have to turn the volume on the TV up all the way because we're in an apartment. But B, because at the beginning, like Leanne was having a little bit of trouble understanding because she said, "Oh, they're mumbling a little bit. Maybe if we turn the captions on."
Right.
So several times throughout the first part, which this is so wild to me that captions do this, but it'll say something like tense music with little
Right.
music notes on the end, or like ominous music. And so I think, knowing that there was some trauma in the movie, but not knowing what it was, every time that the screen would say tense music, ominous music, like I just became hyper aware, and I'm like, something crazy is going to happen. And to see Juan come into Sharon's life, I just
Word.
kept thinking, is he going to do something terrible to him?
Mm-hmm.
And then now, now that we're talking about it, now that we're processing it, I wonder, was part of that me seeing how the music's described? Was part of that my own stereotypes and prejudices and things that are connotations that are in my head for certain types of people? And then to see that Juan was just an incredible person in Sharon's
Amazing.
life.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if father figure is the right thing, because I think he was a little bit more than that, because he was a friend, he was a father figure, he was security, he was, and I read this about the movie while I was watching it. I got on IMDb on my phone, and there's a little trivia thing for every movie, and it says in there that the scene where he's teaching Sharon how to swim, that Mahershala Ali was teaching that young boy how to swim. That
Oh,
was
wow.
real.
Oh,
That was
wow.
it,
I
that
didn't
was
know
real
that.
life, yeah. So he was literally teaching that young man how to swim, as the character was teaching him how to swim. And you see Sharon struggling at school. There's some bullying that's shown. There's him with, the scene with his friend that he takes him apart from the other group on the field and says, you can't let them see you be soft.
Right.
You gotta fight back. And then even tries to, like, I don't want to say that was a real fight, but he like shoved him and stuff a little.
Right.
just
Trying to teach him how to toughen up a little bit.
Here's how you got to be in order to belong in the group. And you see he doesn't have to do any of that with Juan.
Right.
Juan finds him in, I think he called it a crack hole, but I mean, it was like an apartment that was abandoned, that was boarded up. And I think, what was it he was holding up?
He was holding a crack pipe or crack
Okay.
vial or something.
Yeah, he just found it on the floor in there, and as he's holding it up, you hear this noise, and the boards from the windows start coming off, and there's Juan. And he just finds him, he sees him, he speaks with him, and he pulls him out and takes him to get something to eat, takes him to his home, and he says something like, "Oh, you're not going to talk for me. I bet my girl can get you to talk."
Yeah.
And even then, I'm hearing that, and I'm like, oh, man, what are they going to do to this kid?
Oh, that's so funny. That makes me laugh.
And
I didn't experience it that way at all. I was like, when I saw it the first time, I was like, oh, she must be like a social worker or a teacher or something like that.
Oh.
Because, of course, like I've grown up with these women who have gotten out and gotten education, but are like still obsessed with trying to save that bad boy. And so I'm used to that character, those two characters together, and that couple was really normal to me or
Yeah.
something that I've experienced. I mean,
Yeah.
she was exactly what I was expecting.
And she was just like you said, completely normal woman who sat down at the table with Sharon and gave him food. And at one point, I think even there was like, hey, you know, when you're at our table, you got to look up.
Right. Right.
You know, so even just giving him a little bit of, I don't know what the right word is, education, like love through teaching and how to be a person that he wasn't getting from his mom.
Right. She just wasn't there. She wasn't able to be available.
Yeah.
I think that that's one of the things that I just really loved about the movie. You talked about the ominous music and how you were holding your breath. And I think that, I guess one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it to this particular podcast, not just that I love the movie for it generally breaking stereotypes, but I thought that it was a really powerful tool to be able to help therapists, especially, to understand something about marginalized populations, but to kind of reinforce something about the human experience, right? Because, like, I think we always have this fear. You and I have talked about it. We talked about it at the beginning of this podcast. Am I enough? Am I bringing enough to this room with this client? Am I doing this? And the whole movie, you are holding your breath and you want to interfere and you want to yell. Like, they create the situation where you want to tell everybody in the movie, stop! Why are you doing that? Don't do this. Don't do that. And the movie shows, like, it's not great, but they're still here. You get to the next scene, and when the next scene comes on, you're expecting, you know, everybody's going to be in this horrible situation, but they're just still here. We're still here. And I think that's, like, so important for me personally to remember. I think it's really something that helps me in working with marginalized populations is that when I walk into a room with them, and when I said I didn't realize how important it was going to be for me to be here, I didn't realize that my clients were going to need to see me and know that I wasn't going to be judging them and that I would already have that understanding. I already know that the people in their lives have a lot of layers. And I think when you grow up in a lot of trauma and when you grow up in a lot of marginalization, I think that it's really hard sometimes to walk into the therapy room because you want to protect your people.
Yeah.
And you don't want your people to be judged. And you don't want to be judged. And you don't want to be condescended to. And I think so many people enter therapy in wanting to work with marginalized populations, and they kind of want to be this superhero. And they're like not looking at what do these people already have. Yeah. What are these people, what are the survival skills? How did they make it this far? Look at their resilience. It's not to be looking at people and going, man, I feel so sorry for you. Like, your life sucks and I just need to save you through this therapy process. And maybe me even, quote unquote, helping you might look really, really different than I might think it's going to be. Me showing up and your life being okay, or you feeling okay, because that's really what it's about, right? Being okay is going to look different, and it did look different in this movie than, you know, I might have imagined as the therapist.
Yeah.
It speaks so much to that part of me that really believes therapy is about the client.
Well, clients and people don't need saving.
Right.
Nobody comes to the room because they're looking for Superman to fly down and pick him up and carry him away. Mm-hmm. People don't need saving. People need to know that they're heard and that they matter. Mm-hmm. And they may need some help in understanding and processing certain things, but you can't help somebody understand and process from a position that you're above them.
Right.
You can't do that.
Right.
You can only do that beside them.
Right.
And you know, Sharon in this movie, I don't know if Juan saved him.
Right.
But Juan certainly came along beside him.
Right.
And
that's so much of a skill that I try to look for in my clients, you know, and if they don't have it, that's something that I try to build. And when I say a skill, I mean the one that Sharon had, right? Of being able to, because it wasn't just that Juan was so great.
Yeah.
It was that Sharon was able to receive it.
Yeah.
Like, he showed up with these people. He kept going back to, what was the Janelle Monáe's character's name, the girlfriend?
Trying Teresa?
Teresa. He kept going back to Teresa. He was able to see that Teresa wasn't able to give him, was able to give him some things his mom wasn't able to give him. He was there and able to receive the relationship. And I think that's such an important resilience point. You know, they've done all these studies about why do people survive all of these horrible traumas? And being a trauma survivor myself, I think that is such an important skill that people need to have, and that can make a difference between whether you're okay or whether you're not okay, is when people come along that are there and able to help, are you able to see them and are you able to grab onto that?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if you've experienced this in your work yet. I have had clients that when they come in, they're just not ready.
Right.
And I try my best to even honor the fact that they came, because I think that's a degree of readiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so even just recognizing, you know, I probably need to try to get some help. That's step one.
Right.
But there's a big difference between I'm willing to come to the room and I'm willing to pull open my chest and show my heart, and I would say, you know, and I would say this to anybody that's listening, that's even thinking about therapy. Please don't hear that you have to be in any certain place to come to therapy. So much of therapy is you learning to trust your therapist, and your therapist learning to how to be there for you. Because being there for you may be different than being there for another client, may be different, because we're people. And none of us are the same. And so the relationship that you and I have sitting here in this room today, that's going to be different than the relationship I have with any other person I talk to. And so how could I expect as a therapist that my therapeutic relationship with client A is going to be the same as client B?
Right.
And so, you know, I've had clients before where it took 2 sessions for them to loosen up and trust me. I've had ones where it took 20. I've had ones where it's still a work in progress. All of that is okay.
Right.
Because, you know, it's all about the client and whatever they need. And if they need the extra time to know that I take their story so seriously that I want to steward it well and they can trust me with it, then I want to give them that time. You know, and so, you know, Sharon was able to receive from Juan and from Teresa, and it did take him a little bit of time.
It did. He didn't speak when he first went there. And how many times have we been in that situation with clients where they come in and you're like, you're here, but will you speak?
Yeah.
I totally felt that pain when they were sitting there with him and he would not speak.
I've had those, yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course it kicks in with us that we want to overfunction.
Right.
And talk and give and ask. And sometimes that's not what they need.
Right.
Sometimes it is.
Right.
But Juan and Teresa were so great to him. And then you get to the second part of the story. Well, I mean, we're completely leaving out everything with the mom that was in the front, the front part. I think this is something that really struck me, and I think it's before I realized what Juan was doing. He takes Sharon home to his mom, Paula, and then when
she was so brilliant at that role too.
Yeah, you know that's Tia Dalma from the pirate movies?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, the Pirates of the Caribbean, yeah.
So he takes Sharon back home, and when the mom gets him, he goes to, I don't know if he was going to shake Sharon's hand or something like that, and she pulls him away from him.
Yes.
And I thought, when I saw that part, I thought, oh, what in the world would she have done that for? And I thought, does she see Juan and have some kind of preconceived notion of who he is or what he is? And then you find out later why she pulled him away, because mom is addicted to drugs and getting them from Juan. Right. Or at least people that work for Juan.
And that lady is my auntie. I definitely have that auntie in my family. And I really, that character brought up some really serious emotions for me, the mom character.
Wow.
And I thought that they handled it really beautifully in that they really let you see none of the characters were perfect. And I think that sometimes when we, like, the movie was hard, because I think sometimes when we watch a movie, we want it to be easy, just like we want people to be easy, just like we want therapy to be easy, and it's work. And, you know, the mom character was that type of person that's really challenging, you know, for me personally, to be able to just be present with without any judgment.
Yeah. And I think I want to like highlight and cross stitch what you just said onto a pillow or something. Like, you want people in the movie to be all good. You want them to be all bad. You want to have a good guy and a bad guy, and nobody in the movie.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to hit this too much on the nose, but you want people to be black and you want people to be white.
Yeah.
And everybody in this movie is gray.
Well, and I think that, like, that's so much of the work with our clients. Like, there's this whole thing when you sometimes really get in the muck of therapy with clients. It's like you got to struggle with your own and stay in that observer role, because they very much can kind of suck you into this whole thing of wanting things to be black and white. And I know as a client, I've done that to my therapist.
Yeah.
Like, I've wanted things to be this way or the other. And when the real movement and the work and the magic comes in is when we really can get at that place where we realize no one we encounter is that way.
Yeah. And I
think that's so much of everything. Like, so many of the challenges that people come into, even like spiritual and faith crises, that's what it's about for me.
Yeah. And I think one really beautiful, I kept using this word about the movie when I was talking with my wife about it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
One of the really beautiful things is in the beginning of the movie when he comes home to his mom, she looks like she has it all together. She, you know, has on like a uniform from her job, and she is sitting on the couch, and she holds him against her, and she says, "You're my only, and I'm your only." And, you know, as the movie progresses, she and that relationship fall apart. And, you know, there's a part at the end where he goes to see her, and she's older and she's grayer, and she says, "You're my only and I'm your only." And throughout the course of the movie, you see it's been tough, that there is this distance between, it's not distance, it's hurt. There's this hurt that's sitting in the middle of that relationship. And yet you see him at the end reach across and grab his mom and give her a hug.
Yeah, you know, in that scene, they both really define for me. I have this ongoing conversation with Dr. Leahy. I don't know if she's aware of it being ongoing, but I keep circling back to her with it. I don't know how much of it she remembers from the previous time, but, you know, there's a theme in my family when you look at my genogram of emotional cutoffs.
Yeah.
And so that's a struggle for me, is emotional cutoff. And I think that's one of the reasons why the mom brought up so many things for me. And so I struggle with that. And of course, whatever we struggle with, that's what's brought to us. And so I'm constantly trying to be aware of my own shit with, like, you can't be emotionally cutting off people if you don't want your clients to be emotionally cutting off people. And so, you know, one of the things that I love about this program,
hold on. I'm going to stop you right there, because there's a little bit of a self-shame in that.
There is.
So,
there
like,
is. You're right. You're right.
You should all over yourself right there.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Like, I want to say, like, and this is another reason why I want to try to do with the podcast is, like, you're a therapist, I'm a therapist, but above all, we're just still people.
We are still people.
And we have stories, and we have struggles. And I think even to hear you, and I want to point this out because I do it all the time.
Right.
To hear you say, if I want my clients to do this, I can't do this, I shouldn't do this. You're a person.
Right.
And you're great, and you're okay.
Right.
And if it happens and you can catch it and you can work on it, that's great. And if not, you're a person who is lovely and great, and your story is your story.
And it's a journey. And that's kind of what I got out of that particular portion of the movie, because Dr. Leahy's kind of been saying the same thing to me. She's like, you know, Sasha, she's like, I don't know that emotional cutoff is that clear. And even though we say that emotional cutoffs are unhealthy, like, you resolving the unemotional cutoffs doesn't mean that it has to look like probably what you think it has to look like. And sometimes it can just look like being present with the person. And of course, like, I want to have so much control. And I was kind of not understanding where she was coming from. And in the rewatching of this movie for this podcast, I felt that understanding. When he was sitting with her, when he went to go see her at the rehab center, I felt a really good understanding of exactly what you're talking about. Like the emotional cutoff or not emotional cutoff can be a little messy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be clear. Sometimes it's just enough for us to just show up there and be mad.
Yeah.
Like he was there, he was seeing her, but he was pissed off about it.
And I think that's something that's interesting, and it's certainly something that has been in my life with some of my family members as well. Sometimes resolving an emotional cutoff, in fact, most of the time, it's not that you go to this like full house version of a relationship. It's
right,
not
and
that you
now
go to
I
this,
forgive you and I have a complete understanding of the universe.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, because I think that while forgiveness, maybe you take a journey to get to the point of forgiveness, but forgiveness can certainly be an event. Rebuilding trust and rebuilding a relationship is a process.
Right.
It doesn't happen at a fixed point in time. It happens over time. And sometimes, even though hurts that we have can be relational, which I would say can be kind of abstract because they're not like a physical thing.
Right.
We can still have scars from it, and we still bear the wounds of the hurt and the relationship to where, like this is not going to be an Uncle Jesse and Stephanie sit on the side of the bed and talk about and wrap it up real nice. But for him to show up there and for him to hug his mom after some of the things that had happened, and
for her not to run from it.
Yeah, just the mark of a strong and resilient person who, I think, that whether or not Sharon would have said it in the moment, that shows so much love and care. Because that would be for me the definition of unconditional.
Right.
Like, which is love. I mean, that's love.
Right.
So the beginning, the title card, Little, the middle, the title card, Sharon, and it's him as an adolescent in high school, and really, this is something that I think I'd love to ask you and hear what your thoughts on. In the beginning of the movie, that first part, his mom used a name for him, a term for him, a derogatory term for him, yelled it at him. And some of the other children were calling him that same name. And this is coming from a place of ignorance as well, okay? I wasn't seeing anything, which I think this is part of what Juan was saying to him at the dinner table, that would have made anybody think that he was gay at that part of his life.
Yeah, that was deep for me. As a mom of a queer kid, that whole situation when he asked, like, what's a faggot? And when the mom was calling him that, and when he was being bullied. And, like,
and he even asked, am I gay?
Right.
To Juan. And he's like, it doesn't matter.
And I thought it was so great when Teresa was like, you'll know when you know.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was great, but I also thought it was great. I don't know where I'm at with it, but I know that what resonated for me was the bullying situation and the sensitivity that he had as a person, and how even before maybe a sexuality emerged, that difference in him emerged. And I don't know what I think about it. I'm really still processing that. I know that that's something that my son has talked to me so much about, is being bullied as a kid, and even being bullied by teachers before he would have even had a sexuality.
Yeah.
And I look back on it and I'm like, I don't really know how anybody would have been calling him gay.
Yeah. That's what that's something that I struggle with so much, that first part. And I kept trying to figure out, how can you do this in an hour and a half long movie? I'm not seeing it but is it something that you can see? Is it something that the characters in the movie, could they see, or were they just being terrible?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they were just being terrible because he didn't fit in. And see, that's where I kind of get into this whole thing about like sexuality and gender expression. I don't know whether it's because we have such a small idea of what is normal to be male, and I played with that a lot. I think that they talked about it with, I guess, Kevin, the bisexual character that was the love interest, and how he performed masculinity. You know, they really had him being a person who was a victim of performing masculinity.
One of the first times you meet him in the movie, Sharon's up in a window or something, and he comes up and he's just in the most like foul language he can use, describing, I got detention because a teacher found me having sex with a girl in the stairwell.
Right.
And it is so clearly full of, and as a former male teenager myself, it is so full of this bravado.
Right.
And I am just puffing out my chest and making the most out of myself and doing it, as a way for you to know, like, I am masculine, I'm a man, I'm macho, I'm tough. To see how that relationship, develops and goes.
And I guess that kind of takes me to where I am with it, as far as, you were saying like, oh, well, how do people know? I don't know, people at the same time as I say, I don't know why his classmates would have been bullying him or why his teacher would have been bullying him, because how do they know that he was gay? I will say the thing that was similar to the Sharon character that I saw in my son was a rejection in himself of, I'm not going to let you tell me. That was something that Sharon did from the beginning. I am not going to let you pressure me or tell me what it means to be masculine. So sometimes I will say to people, if they'll ask me, well, when did you know your kid was gay? And it's such an absurd question. And so my answer is like, in utero, he was listening to Cher. Like, I'm a smart ass, so that's usually what I'll say, something like that, but you have an understanding that they're different. Mm-hmm. I always knew that my son was different. I didn't know what was different. I've raised 3 boys, and he was different than my other boys. I don't think he could have been gay because I don't believe people have their sexuality that developed. Mm-hmm. I know that he had, from an early age, a rejection of gender expression and didn't at all, even though he felt sad, and I remember him saying he felt sad about being bullied, he never, like the Sharon character, he never gave in to that pressure.
Yeah.
Of I'm gonna do this. I saw Sharon when they were playing football and he was walking around the situation and he was kind of talking to Kevin like, this is stupid. And I do remember my son being that way during sports. And I remember he was actually pretty good at sports, but he kind of thought it was stupid, the way people got involved in that. And I remember him sort of not understanding why other kids felt a need to perform gender. And that was really interesting. And the other thing that I thought that struck me about that was the first time that I watched the movie, so until the very end of the movie, when Sharon met back up with Kevin, I'm such a jerk that I was mad at Kevin and like didn't even think, oh, he's bisexual. I didn't get the feeling until the very end of the movie he was bisexual.
Same.
I was like, he's a closeted asshole, and he's just bullying him because he has issues in himself. And it never even occurred to me, and I didn't understand that he was actually bisexual and not hiding anything until I saw the last scene, and I saw that connection that he had with Sharon in the same point that he had the connection with the child, his son's mother. Yeah. And I could see that he really equally had a love for both of them. And I was like, oh, okay, he's not just a bigoted asshole who's trying to cover himself.
Oh, that's interesting, because I don't even think that I got that. I thought that maybe he was closeted bisexual, because of, in the middle story, how Terrell gets him to beat up Sharon.
I think he was closeting the part of him that was gay, but I don't think he's just homosexual. I don't think he's binary at all. I saw him as being
Oh yeah, no, I did get that.
Yeah.
I did get that. I didn't get that he would have been the type of person where he would have publicly been comfortable,
right,
like saying, "I can love Sharon. I can love." I think her name was Samantha that he had Kevin Jr. with.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that, that makes me think about that middle part in the story. You see Sharon and Kevin develop a friendship. You see them, they're out at the beach one evening, and they have this physical sexual encounter that is Sharon's first. I don't know where it is for Kevin, like where, it is for him. But you do see this moment of first relational connection where Sharon, I think, is asking him about crying. And he says something like, do you ever cry? And he says, no, I don't really ever cry. And he says, do you? And he says, sometimes I cry so much that I feel like I'm going to turn into drops. And,
I loved Kevin so much the second time I saw the movie that I could understand. And, we talked about this earlier. You were saying, like, why would he even go see him after he called him? Because he beat him up,
Yeah.
And that's how I felt the first time I watched it. The second time I watched it, I was able to see how much mirroring Kevin and peace he gave Sharon, and how he was like a place, like you said, an attachment figure, that he was like a place where it was okay for him to be him, that I was able to forgive him for performing masculinity in that way. And like, probably I should forgive him for that. Like, probably that's the right thing to do, because God knows I perform femininity on a daily basis and want grace for that, because it isn't necessarily probably always the healthiest. Sometimes is everything that I do, and when I wear a pair of high heels, even though I know that they're not comfortable and probably not necessary, I want a little bit of grace on that. I'm not always going to be the perfect feminist.
Yeah.
And so I thought, Kevin's not always going to be the perfect bisexual. He wasn't able to be perfect at that moment.
And isn't it interesting that even with, a group, with one person who is a bisexual in the movie, but maybe this is true across the board, that even with a marginalized group, that there would still be some kind of standard that they would think, I've got to hold myself to.
Right. Well, I mean, and it was so personal for me, because as a mixed race person, who has, I don't have contact with most of my father's family anymore, because my son is queer and I've chosen to embrace that. We just are not at a place where we're able to find some common ground with each other about it. And I have experienced so much homophobia in the Black community. And in many ways, I felt myself alienated from the Black community. And I have so often said, I do not think that this is what I loved the Juan character, because it gave me a little bit of personal hope in the Black community and for the LGBTQ community. It's been in the news lately, and we're looking at it now. They had there's a show on Oprah Network called Greenleaf about the Black church, and they start struggling with the issues of the sexuality. And why is the Black community so rejecting? It's kind of a hot topic right now, but traditionally the Black community has been really rejecting of queer people, and there has been no place for it.
Well, it's not just the Black community, but I mean, I could definitely see just even bringing forth that kind of conversation.
And so I found some hope in the movie, in that, maybe people are going to come around and they're going to be able to see. And I definitely have an understanding that when you're marginalized, there's a feeling of, I don't fucking want anything else to marginalize me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already Black. Like, why do I now have to have gay? Now, why do I now have to have this? I mean, I have felt that personally. I have felt like, is there just got to be, does it have to be one more thing? Do I have to have one more thing that's going to marginalize me? And I have felt so many times that I so badly just wanted one thing about me to be quote unquote normal. Yeah. And so I have a lot of grace that I give even in my own pain. I try to give a lot of grace, you know, to my family and to my community, in not being able to accept that.
Yeah. Wow. The marginalization within marginalization. You know, I just get, and you know, my brain just works in pictures, and I would describe the things that I would see to try to understand stuff in supervision, but like, I just get the idea of like, if you take a piece of paper, you know, that's the whole.
That's what I always use for my metaphor.
Yeah, that's the whole of humanity, and then you tear it in half. And you say, well, this left side of the paper gets to be normal, and then or typical or accepted or whatever word you want to use, and then this right side, this is where I'm at. I'm over here in the marginalization. And then for you to say there's marginalization within marginalization, take that right side of the paper, tear that in half, and the top half gets to remain a little more accepted than the bottom half. And now I'm in this bottom half. And then you're telling me that we're going to tear that piece in half?
Right.
And then that piece?
Right.
Like, when does it end?
Right. And so eventually everybody ends up like, what does the notebook paper have in the margins on the left side? Right, those holes.
Yeah.
And that's what the movie was.
Yeah.
Where it was like the holes.
So
it lived there.
Yeah, Sharon is growing up in a African American, poor, drug addicted, you know, LGBTQ. I mean, how many labels?
Right.
Sheesh. One thing, you know, and then so the first third of the movie, Little, the second third, Sharon, and the final third, Black, which was the nickname that Kevin gave him. So we get to meet him in that last third, and I believe the first shot is him lying in bed and then sitting up. And when I first saw it, I thought it was Juan.
Oh yeah.
Because he has on the same do-rag.
Yeah.
And he looks a lot like him.
Yeah.
You know, and he sits up, and you come to find out he is a drug dealer. He drives the same kind of car. He has the same kind of Crown air freshener. And he has kind of styled himself to be a lot like Juan. And one thing that, you know, my wife pointed out was that the actor that plays adult Sharon, she was like, that guy's great. That guy's going to win all the awards. He's perfect. And she pointed out, when he was with every other person that he was with in that final third of the movie, he was projecting himself with strength, with confidence, with this performing masculinity that you described. When he was with Kevin at the end, he did the same physical mannerisms that the adolescent Sharon did and the child Sharon did, where he allowed himself to be weak, he allowed himself to be quiet, to not be sure, and to not be the chest out, foot forward kind of person that he had to be for everybody else.
Yeah. Well, and the casting was amazing, because I didn't know, I was reading about it recently, that so none of the three people that played Kevin or the three people that played Sharon ever got to meet each other.
I said that to Leanne last night. I read that on IMDb while we were watching it, and she couldn't believe it either, because she thought they had to have gotten together and decided, oh, he's going to do this when he feels this way, or he's going to do that when he feels that way, but they didn't.
I loved that they all just kind of had the same essence. And I thought that it was interesting that he had the same essence as Juan.
Yeah.
But how many times have you found yourself in that space in the therapy room? Is like, you know, you hear stuff. I don't know if you've heard this before, but you're going to get clients that are you. Like, you just get yourself over and over again.
And those are the toughest ones.
Those are the toughest ones.
The toughest ones are the ones where, and I remember having this discussion with Dr. Hopkins, because when I did my practicum in a different place than I did my internship here. But in my practicum, it was pretty much all with adults who were older than me. And so I felt a certain way in the therapy room as a therapist, that then when I came to the counseling center and all of my clients were people younger than me who were still in their undergrad, there were so many times I would feel myself and I never did, thank goodness, but like want to jump out of my skin and be like, don't you just know that, let me just tell you, and,
Right.
and come on. And Dr. Hopkins, being the gentle guiding mentor that she is, would say, well, what do you think it is? And I was like, I don't know. Like I used to dress up when I went to the other place, and I'd wear slacks and a button up and, she goes, you think that's it? She goes, how old were the clients you had there? And I was like, oh, they were all like 50, 60, whatever. How old are they here? Oh, they're all like teens and 20s.
Right.
And she would say, oh, that's because with your adult clients, you didn't know anything about that part of life.
Right.
So all you had were your skills.
Word.
But with these kids, this is all stuff that you've done.
Yes.
It's all stuff that you learned the hard way.
Well, and it's so crazy because sometimes the client will come in and you get that lesson so hard. And it's funny because being a therapist has helped me so much with my faith walk, right? Mm-hmm. And I say, I have such a stronger person of faith since I have sat with people, because I have not been able to deny that people are so connected. Because sometimes this person will walk in my room and I am like, I don't even understand why this client keeps on coming back to me. Like, I have no ability to relate to anything that they're saying. We on the outside have nothing in common. I could say that about you. Like, when Sarah put us together in supervision, I was like, what the fuck, Sarah? Like, you're putting me with this redheaded white guy. I don't have anything in common with this guy. Like, I don't know what, like, it's not going to work. And then you realize people are so similar when you get past the outside, when you get past that top layer. And that has been the amazing gift that I have gotten from being able to sit with people. Like, I think I'm so fortunate to be in this profession that I just, I prayed for a long time because I have had such trauma, and I prayed for faith. And I would always be like, God, why aren't you answering me? I'm asking you to give me faith. And now sitting with people, I have such faith. I have such faith in humanity. I have such faith that things are connected. I have such faith that there's a rhyme or a reason for things, because it's undeniable for me.
Because we as therapists, we get this gift of their story. Mm-hmm. We get this honor of being able, if just for an hour a week, to be with them in it. Mm-hmm. That they would trust us with that. And I know that I found with my clients, regardless of what I think in the first moment of the first session, what I end up discovering is that this is a person, regardless of their appearance, who has loves, who has hurts, who has dreams, who has hopes, who has goals, and who has just the personhood that every single one of us has. And every single client that I've sat with, regardless of if they've been that client that's super easy to work with, or they've been that client that just makes me want to pull my hair out because they won't listen to anything, what I end up discovering is that I have so much in common with them, and that they are just such an absolute masterpiece of a person.
And that they're not alone. They're not by themselves.
Yeah.
And we're not alone.
Yeah. And I think exactly what you're saying, it's helped me to be able to know other people, to love other people, to be in relationship with other people. It's changed my faith. It's changed how I interact with folks, because I've been given the gift of learning how to understand and be with people. And even people that I can't understand, to still be able to sit with them and say, I don't get you at all, but man, like I'm so glad you're sitting here with me, and I'm sitting here with you. Like, because, we're not going to understand every client. We don't have to understand every client.
Right.
That's not what it's about.
Right.
People don't necessarily need that. They just need to know that they're heard and that they're valuable. And a client will tell you what they need from you. Yeah. Some people, they come in and that hour is they just need to unload. Yeah. They just need to empty out everything that's inside of them, and they walk out going, oh man, that was great. Some people don't want to say a word at all, and they want you to tell them. And some people, it's more of a give and take, and wherever you're at. I, as a therapist, am just so glad that I get to sit across from you. And I'm sure that you would say the same thing. It's such an honor.
Yeah.
I remember, like, at the end of the internship, I typed up a thing and I put it on Instagram and just said, I have been given and learned so much more from my clients than I can ever imagine that they got from me. And I'm just so grateful that I had the chance to serve.
Always hope they know that. I always hope that they know, and I try to convey that as much as possible, that I'm just as lucky to be sitting with them as they feel like they are to be sitting with me.
Yeah.
If they don't walk away with anything else.
Yeah. I know that, like, towards the end of the third part of the movie, you know, you mentioned before, like, and I said this before we started recording, I don't see how in the world he could have come back to Kevin after what Kevin did in the second part. But then even in the same breath, I was saying, but that was, and Sharon says this, that was the one person that he had loved. That was the one person that he had had any kind of physical affection or intimacy with. And so that was his attachment figure. That was his attachment person.
Well, and Kevin saw him.
Yeah. He really did. I mean, as much of a crappy thing that he did in the second part, he really did see him. And so I think, you know, in that last part, for Sharon to go back to his mom and embrace her, and then the movie ends with a shot of him and Kevin embracing. You know, you see, and it's kind of what we said before, it's not necessarily that, you know, reconciliation or, you know, resolving an emotional cutoff has to be this cookie cutter idea of what a relationship is. So much as it is, maybe it's just an initial reconnection. And now we're going to try. Now we're going to try to do something different than we did last time. You know, but I think in both cases, with the mom and with Kevin, you saw not just Sharon, but the other person saying, now we can try something different.
Yeah.
And maybe it goes great, and maybe it goes bad.
And it's so funny because, you know, when I started family therapy, so, like, I come from this totally messed up background and all this messy stuff, and I think that at some level, I don't know that I would have articulated it this way, but I think that at some level I had really hoped to learn how to magically turn people into full houses, as you mentioned earlier. I think that there was a part of me that really believed that that's what family therapy school was about, that I was going to come here and I was going to learn how to turn it into that. And I realized that, like, when I got an internship, I really kind of had some moments of panic where I was like, I still don't have my shit together, and I still don't understand how to help other people get their shit together. And I still had
we see the person in the mirror,
right?
And we're like, how is that person gonna help anybody?
Yeah, and it was like so much pressure I was putting on myself. And I think being here, and I think a good internship and a helpful internship for me meant just being okay to be comfortable with that scene as the ending of the movie.
Yes. At the end, I was like, wait, that's it?
Right.
You kind of expect there to be some kind of big climactic.
Right. Are they going to become a couple?
Yes.
Are they going to, like, what's going to happen? Like, and you don't even know what's going to happen. He might go home back to Atlanta and never see Kevin again.
Yeah.
You don't know if he's going to have sex with Kevin. You don't know if he's going to actually, like, make himself, you know, straightened out and not be selling drugs anymore. Like, you don't know if Kevin got through to him. You don't know any of that stuff. And
it's not tied up in a nice, pretty bow.
No, and it is not. No, it's not.
Yeah, your story's not tied up like that. Mine's not. None of our clients are. Nobody that's listening to this has a story that's nice and tied up and neat. And
right.
I think one of the things that could benefit every single one of us is to just realize that's not real.
Right.
Stories don't get tied up like that.
Right.
They're not always perfect, but regardless of if they're perfect, because it's your story,
it's still got some beautiful.
It's got a lot of beautiful, just like this movie did. I am so glad that you picked this.
Thank you.
Like,
I loved it.
I would say just for me to watch it coming from my background, you know, has caused me to think so much, and I would imagine I'm going to keep having conversations about this. I think it's a very important conversation.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing it with me.
And I mean, thank you so much for coming in and talking about this. Let's say that there's somebody that's in the Nashville area that listens to this and they think, I want to go see her.
Okay.
How can they get a hold of you?
So I am Sasha Cory-Pack, and I am I live at Sankofa Therapy Nashville. You can find me at sankofatherapynashville at gmail.com, or you can just Google Sankofa Therapy Nashville. I work a lot with learning from the past. That's what that word Sankofa means, is the importance of learning from the past. It's an ancient African symbol. So that is how you find me, Sankofa Therapy Nashville.
I love it. Sasha, thank you so much. You are one of my favorite people.
Yeah, you're one of my favorite people, too.
And I am just so glad that I got you in my life.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So as Sasha and I were talking about Moonlight, I did tell her some of the stuff that you said about the movie. One of my favorite things about doing this is just getting different people's perspectives on movies, getting different people's, I really think like stories of how movies touched them and how they mean different things to them and how they interpret them. And while I get to get these different perspectives from different people each week as I interview them, I get to get my favorite person's perspective as I'm watching the movie and right after I watch it. And that's because it's you. And I think that you had some incredible thoughts on this one. So like what's some stuff that you think should be highlighted as people maybe watch Moonlight?
First of all, what an incredible movie. All of the actors, amazing, phenomenal, just so good. So in listening to you guys' conversation about it, and then also like, from having watched it, something that stood out to me is just the systemic nature of poverty and drugs selling and addiction. Just because I think we see Juan, and you guys talked about this, which I loved, who is so caring and kind and such a good character, and not who people stereotype a drug dealer to be. And I think it's just an important picture of the fact that, like, A, he's a good person, B, he's a drug dealer, and then Chiron ends up also being a drug dealer. And I don't think that it's because of, their choices and because they thought, I really want to sell drugs and like make this community more violent or dependent on drugs. I think that it's because of the community they were raised in and the things that happened to them in life that ended up being the safest and most, I guess, reliable choice for them to make.
Yeah, I think we mentioned earlier, if the choice is between not surviving and selling drugs, is that even a choice?
Yeah, and I don't think it is. And I think that that's something that's often misunderstood in society at large, and like is probably a big reason behind like the stereotypes of, the drug dealer and somebody who might live in a community that's experiencing poverty. But I thought this movie was an excellent example of it being systemic and not necessarily, based on an individual doing something wrong.
Absolutely. What else did you think?
Well, the second thing I have written down was from something that you guys talked about when you're talking about Chiron's identity throughout the movie. And Sasha says something, and I think it's towards the end. She says that Chiron never gave in to the idea of being masculine, or like the masculine idea. And when I heard that, I just thought, but he does, like at the end of the movie, when he's a full grown adult, he's very much like, you see the first scene that you meet him as an adult. I think you said he wakes up in bed, but like pretty soon after he's doing like push-ups, and we see that he's a drug dealer and he's driving this car and he's wearing the same do-rag, and he's putting on this very, I think, traditionally masculine front. And so my thought just was that I think he did give in to the masculine identity, but I think it was just because that's what was safe. Like, he was tormented in his early life for being different than the traditional masculine, role. And so I think as an adult, he assumed that identity so that nobody could mess with him, and because he learned that that's what he needed to be safe and respected and all of that in the community. And then we see him with the guy's name, Kevin at the end, and he goes back into almost, I want to say childlike, but I don't think it's childlike. I think he's all of a sudden safe to be who he is because he's around Kevin, who has seen him.
It's not childlike. It's his actual true self.
Yes. Yeah.
And it could be that he has not allowed his true self to show up since childhood. And so it may seem childlike, but in that moment, Sharon felt safe enough to become truly vulnerable with Kevin, to let the walls down, let the false masculinity down, and just be himself. Because as he said, Kevin was the only person that he had ever loved.
Yeah.
He was the only person that he had ever been intimate with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that you guys talked a ton about resiliency, like him kind of assuming that masculine role. I think that was his way of being resilient, because he was doing what he needed to do to live in the community where he was living.
Yeah. He had to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Such an incredible movie.
Yes.
And very obvious why it won Best Picture in 2017. That is all for this week of Therapist Theater. Please remember to go to our Twitter, twitter.com/Therapist Theater, but the theater spelled THTR. Or shoot us an email, therapisttheater@gmail.com, and let me know, what do you think about the beginning of the show where we spend some time talking about the therapist that we have as a guest? Do you want some more of that? Do you want some less of that? Do you want a little less of that?
Well said.
Thank you. And with that, the theater is closed.